Good evening. I am Sandra Maraj and this is TTT and Talk City 91.1 FM and online at TTT Live Online Facebook. Welcome to another edition of TT Budget Matters Let's Talk. There are two areas that have been and continue to be topics of debate and discussion in society for several years now. They are gender affairs and child affairs. Well, where do they fall under government's ministerial structure? They come directly under the office of the Prime Minister. Holding the portfolio is Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy. But she is here with our executive producer, News and Current Affairs, Stacey Ann Providence, this evening to discuss how her unit is utilizing monies allocated to them to achieve their objectives and the challenges they face. Stacey Ann?
Thank you, Sandra. Good evening and welcome to the Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for Gender and Child Affairs, the NACC, and the Tobago Affairs, Ayanna Webster-Roy. Now, that's a mouthful, but this evening we'll focus on Gender and Child Affairs. And Minister, your unit is mandated to promote gender equity, gender justice throughout the government policies, the programs, the projects. Now it's all seeking to, and also seeking to protect the rights of children and facilitate their holistic development. You received a supplementation of about 12 million in the mid-year budget review. Tell me, is this sufficient? The monies allocated to your division, is that sufficient to carry out that large mandate of the Gender and Child Affairs Division?
Good evening, Stacey, and thank you for having me. The $12 million, we can work with it. I mean, every ministry and every minister would say that they would require more resources. However, we've been able to align our programs and manage our resources in such a way that we're able to achieve the mandate. Now, the $12 million we would have received during the mid-year budget review had specific purpose behind it. So $6 million would have gone towards the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, because we are in the process of expanding the reach of the authority. So $6 million would have gone towards recruitment for new officers. We recently, as of last Friday, opened the Tobago Regional Assessment Office and Assessment Center for the Children's Authority. And we're going to be opening the Shagwana's office soon. So that $6 million of the 12 would go towards recruitment of approximately 68 persons within the authority, 60 positions for Tobago, and an additional 8 for some of the offices in Trinidad. The other $6 million was specifically to go towards improving our payment per child system we would have introduced last year. What the $6 million allow us to do is to increase the amount of money allocated to each child at a community residence to go towards helping them with their medical expenses. So what would happen is that a child in a community residence will now be able to access additional medical care if it is required through a $2,000 per child allocation at every community residence.
Okay, so you spoke mainly about the Children's Authority and getting staff for that, and the community residents in particular with the medical. But now, in terms of the entire allocation for your division, can you give me a breakdown of how, what is the bulk of your money spent on?
Okay, so the bulk of our money goes towards our projects and our program and implementation. So under Gender Affairs Division, we're currently working towards reducing gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, that would entail ensuring that there's enough public education as well as public sensitization on the issue of gender-based violence. So we partner with NGOs. Also, we do programs directly in communities as well as schools. Apart from the intervention to curb gender-based violence, we also work with our children through the Child Affairs Department, where we have a bulk of our allocation going towards children in care. So those are our children in community residences, as well as training for children in the awareness of their rights through the conventional rights of the child, and ensuring that every child is aware of the rights and responsibilities that go along with the conventional rights of the child, and ensuring that our people who work with children have the requisite skills. So we have been investing a lot in training programs for caregivers, as well as ensuring that our community residents, the staff, they are well equipped to work with children.
And as you mentioned, community residences, there has been some concern about what happens to a child after they leave the community resident. Is the ministry looking at, providing for those, because I understand that they're still quite young when they leave, but is the ministry looking to provide, what they do, putting in place to provide for those children as when it's time for them to leave?
I'm quite happy that you would have raised that. We're actually looking at building out a transition program so that we safeguard children as they move from community residence life to mainstream society again. We would have opened up last year a transition home for boys in South Trinidad, and we're working towards establishing a transition program for girls as well. Now, through the transition program, we provide the opportunity for all girls and boys who are leaving the community residence to be able to develop life skills. The program that we have running now for boys in South is being managed through an NGO. So we'd have put out, asked people to send in proposals, we'd have evaluated it and selected an NGO to work with the boys, ensuring that they have a safe space where they have their privacy, where they have the opportunity to learn life skills. They get to go to school if they're required to go to school. They get to learn a skill. They get to learn home management so they could learn to cook for themselves, But at the end of the day, what we really want is to encourage reintegration into family. So once a family could accept a child coming back, if it is a cousin, an aunt, or anybody else in the family is willing, that's what we try to encourage.
Okay, and in terms of these plans and these programs and process, are all of these included in the national child policy? Because just last year, during the budget debate, you had announced that you all actually completed the draft policy.
The draft policy, yes, and the draft policy was actually approved by Cabinet this year, and we will have started consultations as of today in South, and we move throughout Trinidad as well as Tobago during this month of May to the end of June. The policy is supposed to create a framework to guide the way people develop interventions for children. So what it does is provide a sort of I don't want to say a guideline, but it creates a framework that people could work with to ensure that whatever programs, whatever policies, whatever interventions, they fall within, ensuring that the Convention on the Rights of the Child is reflected and that our children get the best outcome.
Okay, so, and you said the consultation started today?
Today, yes.
And in terms of the actual implementation of the policy, what is the time frame for that implementation? Because you announced the completion of the draft in October last year. You said that Cabinet approved it earlier this year, yeah. And now we've started the consultation. So in terms of where does it go after that, and how long would it take for this policy to become?
Okay, so once we finish the consultations and we review it, once the recommendations and to drastically different to what is proposed in the draft document, then we look for immediate implementation. What I want to note is that because it's a child policy, we have consultations where one day we do adults and one day we do children, so they have an opportunity that their voice is reflected in the policy document as well.
Okay, so children are actually getting to
yes, definitely.
Give their ideas in terms of what would work for them?
Yes, definitely.
And how are you getting, where are you getting the children to give this their
So we would have reached out to various schools and organizations that work with children to bring forward participants. But it is important that we get the voice of the child in the policy. It will be unfair for adults to develop and craft a policy to treat with matters pertaining to children, because all views or perspective may not truly reflect the child's. So having children participate and help to shape it, then we know we'll be able to develop a policy document that would really, really reflect the needs of the children of Trinidad and Tobago and identify meaningful, creative, child-friendly solutions. And even in developing the draft policy document, we would have had engagement with children as well, so that they would have also been able to shape what was presented to Cabinet as a draft policy document.
Okay, and we're talking about protecting the rights of a child. What about their family life? Mm-hmm. Now, there are many reports of where you can see the breakdown in a good family life. How does your ministry address that breakdown in family life in terms of, and because I actually spoke to the Minister of development. Is there some kind of overlap when it comes to addressing these issues? Because it sounds as if you're working in tandem.
And we have to. What I must note is that we take an all-of-government approach to treating with those social issues. So at the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, we have what I call our sister ministries. So the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, we work closely with the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs. We also work closely with the Ministry of National Security. So in addressing issues pertaining to family, while we may focus on the child, it is imperative that we work closely with the Family Services Department of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services to ensure that while we create interventions to impact the life of the child, that the needs of the family is also being addressed. Because I think that children end up in institutions, and the life of children breakdown is a reflection of what is happening in our families. And for us to address the needs of children, for us to ensure that they get the best possible outcome, we have to work to safeguard this institution called the family in Trinidad and Tobago. And we're getting the full support of our various colleagues and the various ministries and departments.
Okay, so we'll touch some more on this whole breakdown of family life and what we're doing for family. But I wanted to go a little more in depth in terms of the child policy again, in terms of, because you're talking about working in tandem with other ministries, other with NGOs. So I wanted to know, in terms of the external support systems, how do the external support system work to help with the implementation of the child policy? In terms, what I mean is, like, in terms of like the family court, the children's authority, even the police, how are all those agencies incorporated in getting that national child policy off the ground?
Well, first off, in developing a draft, we would have had the full support of UNICEF. They would have helped us in terms of technical support. And through the technical support provided by UNICEF, you would have been able to engage all those different stakeholders you would have mentioned. There's a role for everyone. So in terms of security, we rely on national security. In terms of child justice and ensuring that if a matter has to go to court, that the child has an advocate and the voice of the child is heard. We have to work with the judiciary. So what happens is that all the different agencies would have had the opportunity to present their views in preparing the draft document, and now as we roll out, there's a specific role for each agency. As I said, the policy forms like an umbrella guideline, and what the guideline would do is to ensure that anything pertaining to children, that they would be able to follow certain protocols to ensure at the end of the day the intervention is meaningful, it is targeted, and all children get the best outcome.
Okay, and do you have can you tell us a little bit in terms of the consultation? So the consultation today started where?
In South. In South, yes.
And I would assume that it would move throughout the country before.
We're going to go to North Trinidad, Tobago, and then another session in North Trinidad as well. Okay. And as I would have mentioned before, most of the consultations, if not all, would include a component where there's one day for adults and another day for children. And on the days where we have the consultation for children, it's a child-friendly approach where the facilitators would break down the policy so the children would understand, and then we have the ability now to take the views of the children, the voice of the children, and translate that into the policy document. As I would have mentioned before as well, we would have had the voice of the children in drafting the document that is being presented now to the public again for consultation.
Okay, so I think we've fleshed out a little bit in terms of the national child policy, and so now in terms of helping develop the child, in terms of the family life breakdown, we live in a society where you have both parents working, and they don't seem to be able to put that attention towards like what would have happened in the past, towards the development of the child as best as they could, because they're not there. How is the ministry addressing things like that? Because one suggestion had to do with daycares for government ministries, government agencies and things. Are you looking at those solutions towards helping build that kind of thing, providing parents with the needs to have better access to their children and stuff, to help promote a good child development?
Actually, a number of ministries now have what we call homework centers. So we recognize that a lot of parents would have to leave early in the workday to pick up children, and that was affecting productivity. So a number of ministries would have started. I could say for Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services, Tobago, we have a childcare facility at the building. At the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, we also have a homework center. So during the work week and even during the school term, parents could bring their children in after, and they could stay at the building and have structured play and assistance with homework while the parents continue to work. And during the school vacation period, we try to have programs throughout the day so that parents who want to use the service could bring children in. So that is one way we are trying to, encourage family interaction and to ensure that the institution called the family remains stable. But outside of that, what we've been trying to do is to work with our children to build up a sense of resilience by providing training so that, yes, the parents may not be in the home all the time, but the quality time they get to spend with the children, that is meaningful. We have been empowering our children, creating child rights ambassadors who have been able to go out and work not only with their peers, but with communities, so that people understand that children have rights. And by understanding that children have rights, you see the changes in attitude and behavior within the home. Most parents try to do their best. As a working mother, I have 3 young children. I understand how difficult it is to spend that quality time. But what we try to do is that encourage parents and children, once you have that time to spend together, that it really is impactful and meaningful.
Right, on that note, we'll take a break, and when we come back, I want to ask you something about maternity and paternity leave. So when we come back, we'll ask the Minister that question. Welcome back to TT Budget Matters. Let's talk, and we're talking gender and child affairs this evening. And with me is Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for gender and child affairs, the NACC and Tobago Affairs, Ayanna Webster-Roy. Now, before the break, we were talking about building that family unit and helping our children be a little more resilient and spending quality time together. And we were talking about daycare services for government ministries and agencies. And it made me think about calls for extended maternity leave and for fathers to have that right of paternity leave, because right now it's dependent on where the father works. It's up to them. I know this doesn't fall underneath your ministry, but you mentioned that a mother of 3 and you value quality time. What is your opinion on the calls that in some developed countries you have a year of maternity leave? What is your opinion, and do you think that we should be working towards something like that in order to help build that family life, that ideal family life that we want to build?
So as a mother would have experienced best of both worlds. My first 2 children I had outside of Trinidad and Tobago, and I would have had a year maternity leave. And my son, my last child, I had here, and it was the 3 months. And I saw the difference, because during the time I would have had with my first 2 children, we were able to develop a strong bond. So by the time they had to go to nursery or to go to daycare, I was settled and I was comfortable. When I had to go back to work with my son, it was really difficult because I was still breastfeeding. He wasn't really taking the bottle that much, and also it was hard for him to adjust. So for me, I would always champion, that period for maternity leave. Also, with my husband, he would have had the opportunity to get a certain period of paternity leave, and you see the need for it, because the mother would be tired, would be weak, and having that extra support at home. Also, it gives the father the chance to bond with the baby and develop that sort of unity and love. So even if a decision is taken that, okay, mommy could go back out to work and daddy would be the main caregiver, they would have had that time during the paternity leave to really bond with the baby, understand what to do. So if if there's an advocate, a champion for having paternity leave and extended maternity leave, I would be an advocate and a champion. However, we have to take into consideration our productivity in Trinidad and Tobago. And for that to work, we have to try to be more productive as citizens. So when we go to work, we actually give an honest day's work for the pay, you know, to help to justify that. But any day, I would support and welcome extended maternity leave as well as provisions of paternity leave for fathers.
Okay, so taking from that now, thanks for your opinion on that, because I know I kind of hit your curveball. Yes, personal opinion. I want to go a little more on the more serious in terms of crime, criminality, domestic violence. All of these things have been major concerns in our society, and it has. And I know your ministry is deals with particularly with gender-based violence. Can you tell me in terms of what exactly right now, what is the status now in terms of how you are dealing with this, well, upsurge or what appears to be an upsurge of gender-based violence?
And I will go back to something I would have said when we opened the assessment center in Tobago last Friday. I said to those who were gathered that hurt boys and girls grow up to become, in most instances, broken men and women who want to hurt people. And I'm going to answer your question, but first, to address the issue of gender-based violence, we have to start working from the root, working with our children and helping to change mindset. Having said that, currently we are working with a number of different agencies to provide programs in the communities. So one of the programs that we would have started is our Barbershop Initiative. If men are part of the problem, they must be a part of the solution. So the Barbershop Initiative provides a safe space where men could meet and discuss issues around gender and masculinity and what we consider to be some social norms, and have it really interrogated and come to a place to understand how you deal with your emotions, etc. I'm seeing where it is having impact because we work with boys from 14 years old as up to adult males. And what it does is that we bring men in a space where they work with other men. So it's not women coming and trying to push an agenda, but it's men being mentored by other men to understand how gender-based violence affects the community, affects the family, and affects the society. Apart from our Barbershop Initiative, we have been also trying to establish, to ensure gender mainstreaming in our various departments and ministries, establish our gender focal points. So to date, we have in all our government ministries and departments, we have our gender focal points. We have been working now with civil society organizations and private sector to ensure that we have focal points within those organizations. What the focal points would do is help to ensure that gender mainstreaming happens. And once we recognize that we all have to live in a space where we are valued, we are equal, it helps to change mindset. We've also developed a strategic action plan to end gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago, where we are working with different agencies to help to roll out that action plan. And the action plan tackles all sectors of society. It tackles the home, it tackles issues in terms of national security, education, even through our culture. So we're working with different ministries, different private sector organizations to develop and implement this action plan to ensure that we curb gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Another issue we're trying to work on, and we're doing this through our Central Registry on Domestic Violence, is to address the issue of domestic violence. What we recognize is to develop policies and programs, you must have data to inform what you're doing. So the Central Registry on Domestic Violence pulls information from different agencies, from the hospital, from our domestic violence hotline, as well as different state agencies and NGOs. And the information we get from the Central Registry will help us to identify which areas we should target for programs. So one of our interventions through the Barbershop Initiative would have been a direct result of information coming out of the Central Registry, the data. So we knew, okay, you need to target this particular community. And when you target this particular community, you have to focus on XYZ topics. So that's what we have been trying to use. We're trying to use information. We're trying to ensure we use collaboration, working with all agencies or international development partners, working with the local NGOs so that we could really develop a meaningful strategy to address the issue on the ground.
Now, about 2 years ago, there was talk about rape culture and perhaps looking at legislation to deal with rape culture and stuff. Has there been any movements or any accomplishments or any achievements with regards to that?
Okay, so in terms of looking at legislation, what has been happening recently is that they have been looking at the Domestic Violence Act to make certain amendments. So that is currently being done through the Office of the Attorney General. I would have had the opportunity to review a draft document of the amendments. Was it late last year as well as earlier this year? So that will be coming. But outside of legislation is about really awareness and sensitization to help to create the mindset change that we require in Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of the times it's because most of our young boys would have grown up thinking that it is okay to objectify a woman. It is okay to dominate. And we're working through the different organizations, through our schools, to help to curb that concept that the woman is an object to be owned and to be used any which way you feel like.
But how do you think that is being received? Are you seeing any successes where that is concerned? Because, as you said, rape culture is considered part of the culture. So
on Monday, we had a visit from the UN Women Executive. And during the breakfast meeting, the officer who is responsible for male programs at the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, would have reported on the Barbershop Initiative at a particular school. What he would have indicated is that prior to going into the school, they would have had sort of an assessment, a survey with some of the boys in the school about mindset, about what they consider to be norms. And then post the Barbershop Initiative, when they would have gone back into the school, some young men would have said, you know, I would have thought this particular way, but because of the intervention, I now treat with issues differently. I no longer hit out, but I will talk through my problems. I'm better at conflict resolution. I no longer think it is okay to touch a girl inappropriately without permission. So we're seeing where it can have an actual impact in terms of changing mindset and helping to, for want of a better word, to help to break down this concept of the rape culture in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, so we looked at rape culture, but in terms of in the whole gender-based violence, you're seeing a rise in terms of the behavior of girls. In terms of how is the ministry addressing that?
We do programs not only targeting men and boys, but we also do a programs targeting all girls as well. What we have recognized that because girls tend to be achieving and our boys tend to feel threatened, both the girls and the boys don't know how to treat with conflict. And we're working with different agencies. We're working with the Ministry of Education to see how we could address issues of bullying in school, because girls bully boys as well. We're working with NGOs to see how we could implement programs in communities so that our girls know how to deal with issues of conflict. But apart from that, we have also developed a program where we teach our young girls and our women self-defense. Because one part of dealing with the issue is being able to defend yourself. So that's what an initiative we're going to be rolling out in this fiscal, self-defense for women.
Okay,
and girls.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll delve some more into that whole gender-based violence and some of the challenges with getting that message across with Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy. This is TT Budget Matters. Let's talk. We'll be right back. Welcome back to TT Budget Matters. We're talking gender affairs this evening, and with me is Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy. Now, before the break, we were talking about gender-based violence and how her ministry is dealing with that and sending out the message to young girls and boys that there is a different way to deal with conflict. So actually in the break, I started a conversation with the minister asking her about some of the challenges in changing some of these mindsets in terms of when they implement their programs. What are the challenges faced? And I know particularly I was asking about staffing. So tell me, Minister, what are some of the challenges in implementing some of these programs and projects at your ministries?
Because the issues are not and for nature where it's a one intervention and you stop. It has to be sustained. One of our challenges would be ensuring that we allocate the resources that we have in such a manner that the information goes out to the public, and when it goes out to the public, it is sustained. So I would have to say one of the biggest challenges would be maintaining the presence on the ground, maintaining the presence in the media, ensure that the messaging continues. But how we try to deal with that or resource constraints would be working through NGOs. I would have said off the break that we tend to be a sort of facilitator. So we provide assistance to NGOs to go out in communities and to really help to spread the message. And I would have given the example off break of working with the network of rural women producers, where that particular NGO would have embraced the He for She campaign, and they would have been going out to different agencies, and one of the agencies they would have gone to would have been the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, where they would have had the officers there sign up to the He for She campaign. Now, what the He for She campaign does, it asks men to become advocates and champions for women. And I remember when I went to the signing up ceremony for that, the female officers were really happy because, it's male-dominated field, and sometimes they tend to feel a little, under duress. And seeing so many men in the Army, in the Coast Guard sign up to say, I am going to become an advocate and a champion for women. I'm going to value women. I'm going to ensure that the rights of women would be respected. That was a big signal. And with every man or every individual that we get to become a champion and an advocate, it goes a long way in helping us to achieve our mandate, because they themselves become the voice piece for the ministry. They become the change agents in society.
Right, but you spoke about reaching people, but exactly how does your ministry go about reaching the people that would benefit the most from your services?
So we ourselves would go out to and host programs. So last year we would have had a number of programs in South Trinidad, in East Trinidad, as well as in Tobago. So we partnered with the National AIDS Coordinating Committee to do a gender-based violence awareness workshop in Tobago, in South Trinidad, showing the link between gender-based violence and HIV. And that was quite successful in all the areas we would have gone to. So we actually go out as well and implement our programs in communities with the limited staff we have. And I must commend the team at the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs. I remember on Monday with the UN Women, they said to me, it's a small team, and you all are quite young, but you all are achieving a lot. We have been able to do a lot with the resources that we are allocated, and we continue to do a lot because we are all committed to ensuring that we end gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago. We are all committed to improving the lives of our children and our vulnerable. It's not a work for us. If you interact with the team, it's a passion. It's something that we live daily.
All right, so you brought up improving the lives of our children and those vulnerable in society. The Children's Authority falls under your ministry, Office of the Prime Minister. I understand in terms of how does that operate? Because I understand there are some challenges probably with the process for adoption and foster care.
Not necessarily challenges. The Children's Authority, as an institution, is working towards ensuring that our children, particularly those that are vulnerable, have a better outcome. One way we have identified in achieving that mandate is through adoption for children who are ready and available for adoption, as well as increasing our pool of foster carers. So last year we would have had an entire month dedicated towards foster care and adoption awareness, encouraging citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, if you're able to, if you're willing, you could sign up, register to become a foster carer. You'll be assessed by the authority, and then a child will be matched with you. Adoption. We have a number of children in homes in Trinidad and Tobago, and some of those children have been languishing in homes. And for some reason, some parents don't want to sign over parental rights, but they're not visiting the children regularly. They're not trying to be an integral part of the child's life, but they're not signing away the right to the child. So those children grow up in a home. Now, the Convention on the Rights of the Child notes that every child deserves to be in a loving, stable home, not an institution. And I would like to make an appeal to those parents who know that they have children living in institutions, and they know that they're not genuinely concerned, and they know that they cannot care for the child and have no intention of caring for the child, to allow the authority to place the child with a parent who is willing to adopt. It is only fair. It is only fair that that boy or that girl gets the opportunity to be a part of a family setting and to be loved and to be cared for. Yes, the staff in the homes could do it, but there's no love, no greater love than the love that somebody who looks at you and embraces you as a child could give you than what is happening currently.
In terms of foster caring?
In terms of foster caring, it's also providing opportunity for children who may have to be away from their family for a while to be, cared for by someone who could provide a place of safety and comfort instead of having them to go to a community residence. So we encourage people, we actively encouraging people to contact the Children's Authority, find out how you could become a foster carer, and then once you're given the opportunity to really embrace it.
So you're talking now about appealing for people to come forward to adopt children and to be foster care parents.
We actually have a number of persons on the waiting list to be to adopt children, and is trying to find children for them. So one age group that often struggles is those persons who are maybe from 10 and a little older. Everybody wants to adopt a baby, but just as a baby requires love, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, a teenager would require the same love. So it's changing the whole idea about adoption is about a baby only. Adoption is about a child that is available, and once there's a fit, taking a child and loving a child as your own. In terms of foster care, sometimes it may be for a short-term period or a longer-term period, but what the authority would always do is assess the home to ensure that that child is going to a better place and that child will be safe. So they will go out, they will interview the community, interview the potential foster carer, interview the relatives to ensure that, yes, once we place a child there, that child would be well taken care of.
And you're talking about assessment of homes and stuff, but in terms of the Children's Authority's mandate, in terms of looking out for children, in terms of what they're doing to encourage, in terms of the people to come forward when they see something happening that is not right where a child is concerned, to the Children's Authority to protect their privacy, and so that to encourage them to come forward and say, oh, you'll need to address this because this is happening here and this child is in danger.
So the entire month of April was designated Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month, and that is something that's been ongoing. And during that time, the Children's Authority would partner with the Office of the Prime Minister and different agencies to go out and sensitize the public. We often stress the fact that if you call the authority, your information remains confidential. The authority would receive numerous calls, and for those children who are in imminent danger, the emergency response team would go out and assess the situation. I want to reassure the public that every call coming into the authority is treated with a sense of urgency. Some people say, well, I called the Children's Authority and I didn't see anything happen. You might not have seen something happen, but the authority is actively investigating. But those children who are in imminent danger, if somebody calls and says, I just went and I saw XYZ being abused, the authority would respond like that. And remove the child from the setting and ensure the child is safe.
Okay, so this is TTT Budget Matters. We'll take a break and be back with more discussion on gender and child affairs. And welcome back to TT Budget Matters. This evening we are discussing gender and child affairs here with Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy. Now we've covered several areas under her division, which is part of the Office of the Prime Minister. And we've reached a stage where we want to look ahead. Now, we were mainly discussing what they're doing with the money for fiscal year 2019. But we're almost there too. We are halfway there, more than just past the halfway mark to fiscal 2020. So I just want to get from the minister, where do they, what projects are in train? What are they looking for? What are you looking forward to within as the fiscal 2020 approaches?
Definitely improving our transition program, ensuring that we have more transition facilities for girls and boys available in Trinidad and Tobago. That is one of the key areas we want to focus on in the next fiscal year, as well as building out and ensuring that we have more spaces available for children, especially those children who we consider our chins. Most of the homes that are run voluntarily I find it difficult to cope with children who may have behavioral issues or who may have been placed before the courts. So what we are looking to do as a government is to ensure that we have the facilities in place to treat with those children. That would mean a significant investment in infrastructure development, because those particular homes would require security, etc. So that is one of the things we are looking forward to. Also, looking ahead is treating with our national HIV/AIDS policy. We are currently working on the draft document, so going ahead, we're hoping that we'll be able to complete the draft, let it go out for consultation, and start rolling out and implementing to ensure that the national response to HIV and AIDS is well coordinated so that we achieve our targets for 2030. As Minister, personally, I would really like for Trinidad and Tobago to really assess the way we treat our children. Is a reflection of us as a society. And as I would have said earlier, if we have broken boys and girls, we're going to have angry men and women who go on to hurt people in society. For us to deal with issues of crime in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to tackle our homes and tackle our children. We have to ensure that our children are safe, they're happy, they're secure, they're knowing that your country, your society cares for you. Once we could really ensure that the systems are in place, the infrastructure is in place to provide meaningful care and protection for our nation's children, and once we ensure that our families, the institution we call the family, is really protected, I'm positive that we could really have a grasp on crime in Trinidad and Tobago. That's one of the things that I'm personally concerned about, how it is that we treat with the issue of crime and the correlation between crime and families and our children.
And with regards to getting everyone on board with your programs, your projects, can you tell me how involved is the private sector in terms of rolling out some of the programs underneath the gender affairs and the child affairs?
I'm happy to say that private sector has been supporting the work of the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs. Actually, we had one private sector organization asking us to implement the Barbershop Initiative at their organization, and other agencies would have indicated an interest in some of the initiatives rolled out by the Office of the Prime Minister. A lot of the times when we do our public education awareness activities, we get the support and sponsorship, even though it may not be cash, sometimes in kind. So when we have activities focusing on children, you will see private sector organizations donating snacks or presenting a booth with information, etc. A little goes a long way. And for us to really address matters pertaining to those vulnerable people in our society, It calls on all of government and all of society. It calls for all hands on deck. And I'm making a personal plea to all of Trinidad and Tobago. First, to once again be our brothers and our sisters' keeper. First, to really, truly try to love each other, regardless of our differences, because at the end of the day, we all could probably say that we are Trini, we are Trimbagonians, and this is our space, this is our home.
Right. And I just wanted to touch, because you mentioned the NACC, which is under your portfolio, and we didn't really touch on the work of the NACC. And I wanted to, you know, AIDS and HIV, there's a stigma attached to it still. And I wanted to just get a little idea in terms of the progress that the NACC has made in terms of dealing with that stigma and just helping the society move forward when it deals with people with HIV and AIDS.
As I would have mentioned while we were talking about ending gender-based violence, the National AIDS Coordinating Committee would have partnered with the Gender Affairs Division to host a series of outreach focusing on the correlation between gender-based violence and HIV. And what we've been trying to do is to create a behavior change strategy and communication strategy so that we could change mindset and to help to end this stigma. We've been working with a number of different agencies and getting support from international partners to help to develop our approach. And that is where the National HIV/AIDS policy that is being drafted comes about, to ensure that when we have a framework to guide the intervention, as well as we have milestones that we could chart to see how we are progressing. But I must say that even though the NACC is small, they have been making inroads. Right. And there's been meaningful collaboration with the Ministry of Health as well.
Okay. And on that note, Minister, I want to thank you so much for joining us and for sharing not only the facts, but also to giving us a little bit of insight on your personal side and your opinions on this matter. Thank you. This has been TTT Budget Matters, Let's Talk, and we've been speaking with Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for Gender and Child Affairs, the National AIDS Coordinating Committee, and Tobago Affairs, Ayanna Webster-Roy. Now, our discussion tonight focused mainly on gender and child affairs, and of course, we thank Minister Webster-Roy for being here with us, and thank you for joining us on TTT Talk City 91.1 FM and online at TTT Live Online on Facebook. I'm Stacey Ann Providence. Do have a good night.